Hi everyone, welcome to English for You. I'm Kat.
And I'm Elsie.
And today we are teaching you about history.
历史
Yeah, so actually we are talking about something that was not that long ago, but it was something that affected the world in a really big way, and I think it's kind of still affecting it.
Okay, what was the year?
It was several decades.
Several decades.
From the 1950s all the way until the end of the 1980s.
Wow, your history is good.
Yeah, so it was the Cold War, and specifically today we're talking about something called the space race. So how two countries decided to go into space.
所以我们要讲的是冷战期间发生的一件事情 The space race.
So why don't we get right into it and talk all about this exciting space race and what happened?
Reading.
The race into space. As World War II concluded, the world hoped to see an end to all conflict. This wasn't to be the case, though, as another war was about to begin. But this was a new type of war, one that featured many elements of a sci-fi movie. The Cold War was a race between two great powers, the capitalist US and the communist Soviet Union. Instead of fighting directly, they competed to build the most advanced technology and weapons. Each country believed in its own ideology, and both were determined to be the winner. The 1950s saw the war move away from Earth and into space, starting what's known as the space race. The Soviet Union took the lead in this race to space. In 1957, it successfully launched the Sputnik and Sputnik 2 satellites. A year later, the US launched its first satellite, called Explorer 1. However, the harder the US tried to catch up to the Soviet Union, the further behind it fell. On April 12, 1961, the Soviet Union put the very first person into space. This man's name was Yuri Gagarin. Gagarin returned to Earth as a global hero, and his name forever lives on as the first to enter space.
All right, so our article starts out, as World War II concluded, the world hoped to see an end to all conflict. So now we're starting out at the very beginning of things for this era. World War II, which happened from the 1930s to 1945 in Europe, the Pacific Ocean region, Asia, and Africa. So it really was a world war. It was fought all around the world by almost everybody. So it was the Allied powers versus the Axis powers, which was like kind of US, Britain, and Western Europe versus Germany, Japan, Italy. Yeah.
也就是同盟国跟轴心国之间的战争
And Russia was on the Allied side at the time, but later Russia and the US started fighting.
OK， 所以我们在第一句话当中呢，看到时间是二战结束之后，那有个动词叫做 conclude， 这个动词呢代表结束。画下句点，所以当二战结束的时候呢，全世界都希望能够看到所有 conflicts， 所有冲突的结束。
So we all hoped, let's have some world peace. We're not going to fight anymore. If only. This wasn't to be the case, though, as another war was about to begin.
当我们看到 was to do something 或是 were to do something， 它用来表示的是呢，过去的某人某事接下来会怎么样。那再来我们还看到三个字是 be the case， 代表如此。所以呢，我们可以说 He thought the plan was to be carried out, but it wasn't the case. 他以为计划会被执行，但事实却不是如此。那课文这边说到的是呢，不过事情却不是如此，冲突没有要结束，因为另外一场战争即将开始。
So there are actually many different smaller wars that happened during the decades after this, but the one we're talking about today is not not the kind of war that you fight with guns. Not really. It says, but this was a new type of war, one that featured many elements of a sci-fi movie. Sci-fi. You might have heard this term before. It's short for science fiction, like space movies, Godzilla, Star Wars, advanced weapons, things with aliens, all those different kind of movies that deal with things that are in the future but not real. That's science fiction or sci-fi.
所以 sci-fi movies 指的就是科幻电影。那这边课文说到的是呢，这是一场新型的战争，不是拿武器，它拿的是一种以许多科幻电影元素为主的战争。So what was this war?
It was the Cold War. So the Cold War was a race between two great powers, the capitalist US and the communist Soviet Union. All right, so let's talk a little bit about these two words, capitalist and communist, because this is important to why they were fighting. So capitalist or capitalism is a system that relies on like a free market, free economy, and everyone is trying to make their own success, and the government is not really getting involved very much. The communists are very different. It's a system where everyone shares the resources, property is owned by everyone, it's public, and the working class has the power to set their own rights. So it's sort of like communism is bottom up and capitalism is individual. Yeah. So at the time, Russia was called the Soviet Union or the USSR. This is Russia during its communist government days. That's what it was called.
The Cold War 指的就是冷战。那冷战呢是两大强权间的竞争。我们还看到呢这两个形容词哦，一个是 capitalist 形容词资本主义的，相反 communist 形容词共产主义的。那这两大强权呢分别是资本主义的美国和共产主义的苏联。那美国它是资本主义的，代表它奉行的是资本主义。那这个名词呢我们念作 capitalism。苏联所奉行的共产主义，我们说 communism.
All right, so what is a Cold War versus a hot war? Well, the next sentence kind of explains it. Instead of fighting directly, they, the US and the Soviet Union, competed to build the most advanced technology and weapons. So to compete is this verb that means to have a contest or competition. It means to race against another group or person to be better than them, but without fighting them. So competitions, competing could be things like sports, games, school contests, science contests, film competitions. But this was a competition between two whole countries. They were trying to be the stronger country, have the better military, have the better weapons. So an example for compete would be Gary and Jenny competed with each other to see who could build the best Lego spaceship.
OK， 我们这边呢先来看一下 instead of 这个介系词片语哦，记得后面加上名词或 ing， 它代表的是并不是。我们可以说呢 instead of staying at home when the typhoon hit,They went hiking， 也就是他们在台风来的时候并没有待在家，他们选择去爬山。那我们可以用 instead 这个副词来改写，这个副词呢也是并不是的意思，不过用法不一样哦。他说 When the typhoon hit, they didn't stay at home 句点之后你再开下一句 Instead, they went hiking.
Why would you go hiking during a typhoon?You're crazy. Apparently. Anyway, so you have another word here, which is advanced. Now, this is an adjective that means not basic, but using the newest and smartest ways available to make better and more powerful things. So advanced technology would mean the newest kind of technology that few others have. Using advanced techniques means techniques that are hard to do and take a lot of practice. If you are an advanced speaker of a language, it means you are a person who can speak very well without thinking too much or trying too hard. Like Elsie is an advanced speaker of English.
Thank you.
It's true.
I hope so.
You are. Anyway, the opposite of advanced would be beginner or basic. I think in this case it would be like basic weaponry, but they're trying to do advanced weapons. So here's an example sentence for advanced. These clothes are made out of an advanced material that keeps out water and wind, but is still thin and light.
所以 advanced 这个形容词呢代表先进的、进步的。Advanced weapons? So what are weapons?
Well, let's go find out. When we're talking about weapons, these are things that are made for fighting, hunting, and war. So things that are made or used to hurt or kill other people and animals. Things like spears would be the most basic weapon, just a stick with a tip at the end that can go into an animal. Swords, guns, tanks, which are a big war car with a gun on it. Bombs, missiles, which are rockets. Axes, which you use to chop wood, but you can also chop people. Those are all weapons. The weapons made during the Cold War were mainly space weapons and huge bombs, like atomic bombs. So the example sentence for weapons here, the farmers picked up their weapons and prepared to fight the enemy that was coming to their town.
课文这边说到呢，美国和苏联的冷战并不是直接开战，那他们是互相较劲来建造最先进的科技和武器。
So they were basically trying to measure mine's bigger, mine's bigger, mine's bigger. Yeah, they were trying to measure who had the most power, who could make the bigger weapons. Each country believed in its own ideology, and both were determined to be the winner. So when we talk about ideology here, what countries believe in, your ideology is the ideas and beliefs that define your way of living or your way of running a country or group, or define which group you belong to. So religions, political groups, big schools of thought like philosophy, they all are ideologies. They all have their own ideology. So there's like Christian ideology, there's KMT ideology, there's DPP ideology, things like that. So determined is this other word we have here. It's an adjective that means very willing, and your heart is set on doing something. If you're determined, you want to do it no matter what. If you say, I'm determined to finish this whole cake, it means you're saying, I will finish this whole cake. Even if it makes me sick, even if I feel full and uncomfortable, I will finish it. If you are determined, you have determination. This is the noun form. Also, you can determine something, which is a little bit different. It means to define or find out what something is. So, like to determine the answer to a problem. But here we are talking about being determined, being very willing to do something. The example sentence we have is, I am determined to finish this book tonight, and I won't sleep until I'm done.
OK， 来，我们一个一个看哦。像我们呢，在这句话里面先看到了 each 这个字，它代表的是两个或以上的人事物中的每个各自，所以 each 后面我们要加上单数名词。这边说到的 each country， 也就是美国和苏联各自都要做的一件事情。那再来 ideology 这个字指的是意识形态，也就是你相信你认为是对的事物。所以课文这边说到呢，美国和苏联他们相信各自的意识形态，而且都决心要成为赢家。 Determined 这个形容词呢，代表下定决心的，坚定不移的。 Be determined to do something， 下定决心做某事。
So they were determined to win.The 1950s saw the war move away from Earth and into space, starting what's known as the space race.
1950年代呢，见证了战争从地球移到了外太空，开始了大家知道的 space race 太空竞赛。
So now we are doing something that's a little less about bombs and a little more about who is going to be the first in space. Well, that's a good question. The Soviet Union took the lead in this race to space. This means that they became the leader in the game. Basically, they were in first place from the beginning.
Take the lead 这个片语呢，代表领先。Take the lead in something or in doing something 代表在某事当中获得领先。For example, the US took the lead in the development of COVID vaccines. 美国在发展新冠肺炎的疫苗上获得领先。那课文这边说到的是呢，苏联在太空竞赛当中获得领先。
So how did they take the lead? The Soviet Union, it says in 1957, it successfully launched the Sputnik and Sputnik 2 satellites. So to launch is a verb that can mean to start a new thing or open something, but here it means to send a rocket or a moving item forward or up toward where it's going. So launching a rocket means starting the engines and making it go up into space. When you go to a rocket launch, it's a very exciting thing to watch. So an example sentence might be, everyone was excited to watch NASA's newest rocket launch. And it would take a robot to Mars to study the planet.
Launch 这个字呢，在课文中是动词的形式，代表发射，那它也可以当作名词来使用。那另外呢，它有发行的意思，比如说 to launch a new product， 发行一个新的产品； to launch a new brand， 发行一个新的品牌，或者是 to launch a new movie 发行一部新的电影。再来我们看到卫星这个字是 satellite。1957年的时候呢，苏联成功的发射了史普尼克1号和2号这2颗卫星。
So Sputnik is actually very, very small. I think it's only about this big, and then it has like 4 little legs. So that was the first satellite in space. And because the USSR, or the Soviet Union, was winning, the US was like, oh no, well, we have to catch up. And so it says a year later, the US launched its first satellite called Explorer 1.
OK， 所以美国不想输，1年之后，美国就发射了第一颗卫星 Explorer 1 探险者1号。
So they're like, well, we're not going to fall behind. However, the harder the US tried to catch up to the Soviet Union, the further behind it fell. That means they're trying to catch up. It means they're trying to get into the same spot with another person or group that they're competing with or trying to work with. If you have to catch up on your work, you are behind. So you don't want to be behind. You don't want to be in a position to catch up. You want to make sure that you are doing it in time.
So the US was trying to catch up with the Soviet Union.
Yes, they were.
今天的英文练功房呢，我们要说到比较级，越如何就会越如何的用法。那句型呢是 the 加上比较级，加上第一个主词，第一个动词，逗号之后再接上 the 加比较级，加第二个主词跟第二个动词。先给同学们一个简单的例句 The hotter it gets, the more impatient I become 代表天气越热，我就变得越不耐烦。那如果呢，形容词比较级用来修饰名词的话，那修饰的名词呢，要紧跟在比较级形容词的后方。就像是这个例句 The less junk food you eat, the healthier you will become 这个形容词比较级是 less 它去修饰后面的名词 junk food 代表呢垃圾食物吃得越少你就越健康课文说到呢然而当美国越努力想要赶上苏联就落后越多
So the US is lagging behind. They're kind of slow on the getting things into space, aren't they? So what it says is on April 12th, 1961, the Soviet Union put the very first person into space. Ooh, so they've got 2 wins under their belt so far.
It seems they won the race already.
Not quite.
OK, 在1961年的时候呢4月12日这天苏联将第一个人送入外太空 Who was this person?
This man's name was Yuri Gagarin.
Yuri Gagarin 这个人的名字就是 Yuri Gagarin.
Yeah, so Yuri Gagarin, very famous. You probably heard of him. Gagarin.
What the name? I think the name sounds like Japanese name.
Yuri? I think Yuri is actually a common boy's name in Russia too.
Oh.
Yeah. So Gagarin returned to Earth as a global hero, and his name forever lives on as the first to enter space. Yeah, he's very, very famous. He died a while ago. I think he actually died a few years later in another space accident. But he is forever known as the first man in space. So the vocabulary we have here is global. He's a global hero. That's an adjective that means around the world. If he's a global hero, everyone knows him. Everyone is celebrating him everywhere in the world for being the first man in space. Other global things might be like the global economy, which means the economy around the world. A global pandemic, which we are still in the middle of. The global temperature, which means how hot is it around the world. Global flights that go around the world to other countries. So other words for this might be worldwide, the world round, around the world, or international. That's global. So an example sentence, climate change is a global problem that everyone must work to solve before it can get better.
Global 这个形容词呢，代表就是全世界的、全球的。那再来呢，我们还看到 live on 这个片语，代表继续活着。那如果呢，我们看到的是 live on something， 后面有加上一个受词的话，代表它是依靠某物来维生、生活，意思是不一样的哦。所以我们可以说 he lived on chips when he was broke。他破产没钱的时候，他是靠洋芋片为生，只吃洋芋片的意思。
Please don't do that.
所以如果你只看到 live on。那是不一样的哈。如果只看到 live on， 它是继续活着。课文最后说到呢 ，Gagarin 以世界英雄之名回到了地球，那他的名字也永远留存。
Salute. All right, so that's all we've got for day one, but the space race is not over, and the US may yet catch up in a big way. So we'll find out tomorrow, but for today, we are at the end of our article. Let's go to our For You chat.
For You chat.
All right, so our For You chat question today. Can you think of a piece of technology that was improved because of a war? I can't think of much technology that wasn't improved because of a war. Usually the military is the first to do anything.
Yeah, like the radar was, or tanks.
Wi-Fi. Yeah.
Tanks were actually invented before the war, but were improved during the war.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Or things like they're now doing like invisibility technology or lasers. Lasers were developed, or improved for wartime use. Things like that.
Or guns.
Yeah, guns. Yeah, of course. And so that's just a few examples. You guys can probably think of many, many more. Think of something that could be used as a weapon, or maybe, but isn't always. But probably it's been developed because of a war. So that's all we've got for today. We're going to talk more about the continuation of the space race tomorrow. We'll see you then. Bye.
Bye.
Vocabulary Review. Compete. The brothers competed against each other when they were younger, but now they're good friends. Advanced. Smartphones are becoming more and more advanced as new technology is developed. Weapon. The thief picked up a stick and used it as a weapon to try to rob the man. Determined. Tom was determined to do well on his exams, so he studied very hard. Launch. Taiwan has recently been test launching one of its new types of missiles. Global. Arthur's is now a global company, so it can sell its products to people all over the world.
智慧小补帖
Sci-fi. Science fiction. Capitalist. Communist. Ideology. Satellite.
以上节目是由活用空中美语制作，活用空中美语杂志，请洽询全国各大书店。如欲索取试听教材，请来电02-2364-4000 02-2364-4000，或上网查询，网址是 www.english4u.net www.english4u.net